There's running from scandal, and then there's retreating from the echo of your own choices. When Prince Harry quietly returned to the UK, tabloids called it panic, insiders called it damage control, but anyone who really watched him saw something else entirely. A man starting to realise he'd been living inside someone else's script. For years, Harry built his life around trust. Trust in the people closest to him. Trust in systems meant to protect him. Trust in a love story sold as freedom. But here's the twist. When questions around Meghan Markle began circling back, Harry wasn't running from exposure. He was running from understanding. Because understanding meant facing something uncomfortable that maybe, just maybe, he stopped asking questions long before anyone stopped giving answers. And that's the part. No headline wants to say out loud, the so-called rebel prince didn't leave the monarchy to find peace. He left one palace only to build another made entirely of illusion. So when the walls began to crack, the real question wasn't what Meghan did. It was when Harry stopped seeing what was right in front of him. Because sometimes the hardest truth isn't betrayal. It's realising you were never the one in control. And what Harry discovered next made one thing clear. Silence became the only move left. This story isn't about what's been proven. It's about proximity, about perception, and about why certain names keep resurfacing whenever royal power networks are examined. They called it a return. But let's be honest, nothing about Harry's arrival felt like coming home. There were no smiling photographers, no staged handshakes, no royal waves. Just one man stepping off a plane with the kind of silence that doesn't follow noise. It replaces it. This wasn't the triumphant comeback of a prince reclaiming his place. It was the quiet arrival of someone who had finally stopped pretending everything made sense. Every camera flash at Heathrow didn't capture confidence. It froze, confusion, exhaustion, and something far rarer for Harry, hesitation. For the first time, he wasn't arriving to represent anything. He wasn't the symbol. He wasn't the memoirist. He wasn't the exile. He was just a man standing in the wreckage of choices that no longer felt entirely his own. The headlines shouted, fleeing the fallout. But the truth whispered something quieter. This wasn't escape. This was containment. He didn't come to fight. He came to listen, to read, to sit with paperwork, and long-held whispers that had waited far too long to be acknowledged. And somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't really about the monarchy or Meghan. It was about the thin line between trust and blindness, and what happens when that line finally breaks. So as he walked through that terminal, no entourage, no statement. The world saw a return, but Harry knew better. This wasn't a man avoiding consequences. This was a man finally meeting them. And whatever waited behind those closed doors was about to change everything. He thought he understood about loyalty, love, and truth. Before everything cracked, Harry lived inside a system where trust wasn't earned. It was inherited. His world was built on polished promises. People spoke for him. Institutions handled everything. The schedule, the speeches, the security, all arranged, all rehearsed. He never had to ask how things worked. He was told they already did, but comfort has a hidden cost. It can become a cage lined with velvet walls. The more he trusted, the less he questioned. The fewer questions he asked, the more invisible he became inside his own life. From the outside, the public saw confidence, but behind the scenes there was quiet distance. A man trained to believe that obedience was the same as peace. For years, that system rewarded silence. Let the professionals handle it. Don't get involved. It's better if you don't know. Those phrases became the lullabies of his adulthood, and by the time he realised what they'd taken from him, the damage was already done. But what happens when, one day, the professionals stop protecting and start deciding? That's when Harry's reality began to come apart. Not through betrayal, but through clarity. He realised something uncomfortable. Trust without awareness isn't loyalty. It's blindness dressed up as faith. So when rumours began to surface about timelines, paperwork, and small inconsistencies, Harry didn't feel anger first. He felt disoriented. He wasn't questioning others. He was questioning himself because deep down, he knew this wasn't just about deception. It was about years spent believing that safety and silence were the same thing. And once that illusion shattered, there was no way to go back to not knowing. The only question left was this. What else had he never been told? It started with a name, or rather 2 letters scribbled in a document that was never meant to reach him. DL. At first it meant nothing, just initials buried in a stack of old paperwork his team had quietly overlooked. But the moment Harry asked who those letters belonged to, the room went quiet. Not casual quiet. The kind of silence that shows up when truth is standing too close. What he uncovered wasn't a villain. It wasn't a hero either. DL was something far more unsettling. A symbol. A living receipt of how decisions had been made around him, never with him. And that's when it hit. Not shock realization. The understanding that for years entire choices had been made in his name, while he simply nodded along because someone told him it was handled. Every signature he hadn't read, every file he hadn't opened, they all whispered the same message. You trusted too easily. The discovery of DL didn't spark outrage. It sparked reflection, the kind that cuts deeper than betrayal. Because how do you accuse someone else when the real mistake was your own absence? For the first time, Harry wasn't asking, who did this? He was asking, how did I never see it? That's when the story stopped being about Meghan, the media, or even the monarchy. It became about one question echoing through every decision he'd ever made. If this is real, then maybe I was never the author of my own story. The first crack didn't appear in emotion. It appeared in math, dates, timelines, events, signatures that didn't quite line up. For most people, a missing week means nothing, a blur of travel or appointments. But in Harry's world, every hour is logged, every movement recorded. So when pieces stopped fitting, it wasn't confusion, it was alarm. He began revisiting moments that once felt routine. Hospital visits, public appearances, private briefings. Only now they carried a trace of doubt. The photographs hadn't changed, but the context had. And suddenly the past didn't feel distant. It felt rewritten. Every smile in those photos suddenly felt staged. Every gesture looked practiced, timed, rehearsed. But what unsettled him most wasn't the images themselves. It was the realization that he had never truly verified any of it. He had been present for everything, yet confirmed nothing. The timelines didn't prove deception, they revealed distance. It wasn't that someone had lied, it was that he had never been close enough to the truth to notice if they had. That realization landed harder than any headline ever could. For the first time, Harry saw how easily routine turns into ritual, and ritual turns into reality. The numbers didn't uncover a conspiracy. They exposed neglect his own. And just when he thought he'd reached the edge of what no longer made sense, another discovery was waiting. One printed, signed and stamped with his own name. What he found in that file stripped away the last of his assumptions and forced the reckoning he'd been avoiding. The file wasn't thick, just a few pages clipped together, but the weight of it felt crushing. Harry had seen thousands of official documents before. His name neatly printed, his signature familiar from repetition. But this one felt different, wrong. Every line carried recognition without memory. Details he should have known, but didn't. Agreements confirmed without his true consent. It was like staring at a version of himself written by someone else. The further he read, the louder the silence in the room became. He wasn't angry, not yet. Anger comes from betrayal. This was colder. It was recognition. The slow sinking understanding that his identity had been managed like a brand signed, sealed and distributed by people who never asked if he wanted to be understood, only if he wanted to be protected. The file didn't accuse anyone, it revealed a pattern. How easily convenience replaces clarity. How an entire life can become a chain of decisions you never made neatly documented for accountability's sake. He traced a finger over one signature, the ink slightly smudged, and asked the question no one wanted to answer. Who authorized this? No one looked up, and in that moment it clicked. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a system functioning exactly as designed, just without him in it. And once you see that kind of truth, there's no unseeing it. When Harry arrived at the first meeting, he half expected confrontation, raised voices, questions, maybe even judgment. Instead, he walked into stillness. Rows of folders, cold light reflecting off glass tables. The room carried no emotion, only protocol. These weren't family discussions. They were audits disguised as courtesy. The faces across from him didn't show familiarity. They showed documentation. Every word was measured, every pause intentional. No one asked how he was. No one asked why he'd come. They spoke in dates, clauses, and formal acknowledgements, as if reality itself had been reduced to a spreadsheet. The monarchy wasn't fighting him. It wasn't defending itself. It was processing him. And that realization hit harder than any tabloid headline ever could. The system didn't need to accuse him or defend itself. It only needed to exist. Structured, sterile, self-sustaining. Harry was just another file being reviewed, another variable being aligned with the record. And in that quiet, controlled room, he finally understood what exile really meant. Not distance from a place, but distance from understanding. Everyone there knew what he didn't, and no one seemed surprised by that fact. He signed what was put in front of him. He nodded when expected, and he walked out carrying more questions than answers. The palace hadn't shut him out. It had absorbed him again, not as a son, not as a prince, but as a signature on a page. And behind that signature waited the one truth he still feared most, the truth about his children. It wasn't the paperwork that broke him. It was a photograph, his children smiling in a sunlit garden, unaware of the storm forming miles away. In that moment, everything else faded. The headlines, the meetings, the files, all gone. There were just two faces untouched by history, and that's when it hit him. Every decision he made now would shape their future. The question no longer centered on image or scandal. It was about legacy. Do you stay silent to protect them, or speak up and risk changing the only world they know? Silence could buy safety, but it could also buy confusion, the kind that turns unanswered questions into inheritance. Harry wasn't thinking like a royal anymore. He was thinking like a father, trying to protect innocence without burying truth. Every instinct told him to stay quiet, but silence had already taken too much from him. His peace, his certainty, his sense of self. Slowly, he began to understand something painful. Protecting them didn't mean hiding reality. It meant preparing them for it. And that realization hurt more than betrayal ever could. Because how do you explain to your children that love and truth don't always live side by side? That sometimes the thing meant to keep you safe is the same thing that blinds you? He looked at the photo one last time and whispered, "They deserve clarity, even if it costs me everything." And in that moment, he knew the reckoning wasn't ending. It was starting again. As the dust settles, one truth remains. Silence can delay consequences, but it never erases them. Harry's quiet return to the UK wasn't just about answering questions. It was about confronting a life he thought he understood. Every file, every meeting, every backward glance stripped away another layer of the story. The world once celebrated, but behind every revelation there's another door, another whisper, another shadow that refuses to stay buried. Because the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. This story isn't just about one man's awakening. It's about an empire of image built around him, and the cracks now showing through. And if you think this is where the truth ends, you haven't seen what came before. Our last investigation pulled back the curtain on something many refused to face: the unravelling of public trust. The broadcast that left Meghan standing in silence as Piers Morgan presented the evidence that changed everything. That moment didn't just shake headlines, it rewrote the stakes. So before you go, make sure you've seen how the first domino fell. This isn't gossip, it's the missing chapter in this reckoning. This is Star Spotlight, where the spotlight burns through illusion, and the truth always finds its stage. Stay tuned, the next act is already being written,